Welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to refinish this hexagonal end table. As you can see, the stain is beat up and faded in multiple areas. There are even a couple watermarks from wet cups on the lower shelf. We'll start by using a random orbital sander with 40 grit sandpaper to remove the old lacquer and stain. Because this device is circular, I like to use a Black & Decker mouse sander near the flat edges around the legs. Then there's the painstaking part. Shape a flat piece of sandpaper around your fingers to match the curvature of the perimeter, or the scroll work.
Oh, cool.
So I'm trying to breathe a little life back into them. Switch to the random orbital with a finer 120 grit. Back to hand sanding with a very fine 220 grit. You'll start to notice a beautiful softness to the wood after this. Back again to the random orbital to complement the hand sanding at that 220 grit. Before going further, take the time to remove dust. I like to vacuum for the larger bits. And then Tackcloth for the stubborn dust, but you may use mineral spirits on a rag if you prefer. Many people skip this step, and I used to until I had a couple pieces that stained unnecessarily blotchy. Apply a liberal amount of pre-stain wood conditioner using a plain chip brush. Allow it to penetrate for about 5 minutes, then wipe off the excess with a clean rag. After an hour, I lightly hand sand with the 220 grit before tack clothing to remove the sanding dust. You may choose to use a brush for the stain, but I've fallen in love with these staining pads for most applications. Depending on the level of stain, let it penetrate between 5 and 15 minutes before wiping away the excess with a clean cloth, making sure to go along with the wood's grain. It took a couple days before returning to the project, and if this is your case, by all means, tack cloth to remove dust and debris that may have settled in the interim. Yes! My favorite part, the polyurethane! I'm going with a semi-gloss applied with a chip brush. I begin by applying liberally and then spread it along the grain where possible. After completely coating the desired areas, go back and feather brush into the direction of the wood very gently. This will do a couple things. Number 1, disguise the brush strokes, but number 2, remove static bubbles that may have formed. Depending on heat and humidity, it may take up to 6 hours for the polyurethane to dry. I'm going for a second coat of poly. If you are too, lightly hand sand with a 220 grit sponge and tack cloth away the dust. This will level the polyurethane coat. Now you can go ahead with the next application. I'm going to be extra careful simply because this will be my top coat. After applying, I use a foam brush along the grains to remove any remaining brush strokes. Alright, let's go inside and prepare the glass top. Compressed air liberalizes the grooves of debris. Glass cleaner will ensure a clean epoxy junction. And make sure to do both sides. For this end table, a match is the correct diameter to apply the 2-part epoxy by JB Weld. Finished! Here's a before photo in the lower left hand corner for comparison, as I'm really happy with the way it turned out. As always, thank you for liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next week when we refinish a beautiful vintage Dayton table. See you then.